Hello and welcome to the How to Carnivore podcast. I'm your host, Simon Lewis, and you're tuning into the Plant-Free MD series with Dr. Anthony Chaffee. Dr. Chaffee is a surgeon, nutritional researcher, and former pro rugby player. He's been strict carnivore for 3 years and an on and off carnivore for more than 20. Dr. Chaffee looks and feels like a real-life superhero. If losing fat, building muscle, finding focus, and getting the most out of life is important to you, you're going to love the Plant-Free MD series.
Hey everyone, we're back with Dr. Chaffee again, and now we're going to talk about cholesterol, which is a huge topic and hotly debated. Dr. Chaffee, welcome. And what don't we know about cholesterol?
So the thing is, especially in a carnivore community or going ketogenic or whatever, everyone says, "Well, what about your cholesterol? What about your cholesterol?"
Yeah, it's like the first thing people say.
Yeah, and my answer to that is like, I don't care. What about it?
Yeah.
Cholesterol was never a problem. Cholesterol was never an issue. It was never a marker of disease. It was said to be such, but that's wrong. And we not only know it's wrong, but we know it was fraudulent. So the Journal of American Medical Association published in 2015 actual internal memos from the sugar companies back in the 40s and 50s talking about how there was research coming out saying that sugar was actually the cause of heart disease, which was a brand new disease. And so they were like, we need to cover this up. And so in their own documentation, they detailed how they paid off 3 Harvard professors to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol was causing heart disease when it was really sugar, and to exonerate sugar. And then one of those professors was named head of the USDA in 1965. And then the USDA is the one who declared unequivocally that cholesterol causes heart disease, saturated fat increased cholesterol, stop eating both, okay? So that was teacher coming down going, discussion's over, argument's done, but it was hotly debated for decades. And then all of a sudden USDA saying, nope, this is it. And it destroyed the careers of everyone saying, no, this is actually sugar. It actually is sugar. There are books written about it. And there's much more research now showing this. But what happened just directly right then? So this changed the world, certainly changed America, and then you had these domino effect of these other countries taking on these dietary recommendations. So just in America, we reduced our fat cholesterol intake by 33%. And obviously you don't want meat. Meat's bad for you. Meat has cholesterol. This is why meat became vilified at first, because it had fat and had cholesterol. So you don't want that, especially red meat and eggs. Those are the worst, right? And that fruits and vegetables and grains were good and heart healthy because they didn't have cholesterol. That was the entire argument. The entire basis of the argument was this doesn't have fat, therefore it's good for you. Rocks don't have fat either. So and arsenic doesn't either. So bad argument on its face. But people listen to this, and so reduced our fat and cholesterol intake by 33%, reduced red meat by 30%, increased fruits and vegetables by 30 and 40% respectively. And what were the results? The obesity rate tripled, heart disease tripled, stroke rate tripled, cancer rates tripled, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even developmental delays such as autism and so forth, they all increased exponentially. They almost didn't exist before this time. Now they're the only things we treat.
So we've removed cholesterol, and then heart disease has gone up as well as a myriad of other lifestyles.
Well, that's it. You can't say that cholesterol causes heart disease if you reduce cholesterol and heart disease triples. If anything, you can say that cholesterol is protective.
Says no. Yeah.
No, exactly. And so you can't say that A causes B if you reduce A and B increases dramatically. If anything, you say A is protective, and actually all the studies post 2015 have actually shown this. Okay, so there are a lot of studies that came out in 2015 with hundreds of thousands of patients looking at LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, and heart attacks and strokes and so forth, and they found that people with higher LDL cholesterol and higher saturated fat intake and so forth were actually having less heart attacks, having less strokes, and they were protective against Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, right? Because everyone's eating this heart healthy, low fat diet, and then their brains are decaying because they're not getting the requisite, very long chain fatty acids and THA and so forth that helps and supports their brain. So they're all decaying and becoming, demented as they age. And so, eating, it's a horrible disease, and. But really, it's just malnutrition. You're not getting the requisite nutrients to maintain your body and your brain. So, eating more saturated fat, having higher cholesterol is protective against that. It's also protective against heart attacks. One of the things that I never heard anyone explain properly when I was going through medical school was why was it if cholesterol was the only thing that mattered, with heart. Well, the main thing that mattered with heart disease. Why is it that 50% of people who have heart attacks have lower normal LDL cholesterol? That never made sense to me.
That's a good question.
And so now we know that's crap. And so there was a study in 2015 with 60,000 patients that looked at people over the age of 65 with statins, right? So a statin is a medication to reduce your cholesterol. Most people are on this crap. And they have side effects, right? They have serious side effects. They sap your cells with vitamin CoQ10, and that can actually cause damage to your muscle cells, including your heart, right? So you have to supplement with vitamin CoQ10. Any doctor that prescribes statins without also prescribing vitamin CoQ10, I think is harming their patient. And so you see this, so it has side effects. It has things that you don't want, but you weigh the balance of a medication with the effects that you want versus the effects that you don't want. You want the benefits to outweigh the side effects. But now you have something that's, they had these studies with the statins and so forth. They found that people with the statins and with lower LDL cholesterol were having more heart attacks, were having worse outcomes, were having more cardiac-related deaths. Okay, or at least they weren't getting a benefit from that. So you're getting side effects from the statins, and it's not really providing a benefit. So why are we doing that? And so this article, this study, as a conclusion, said this: like, we seriously need to challenge our thinking on whether or not statins are actually good for people. Okay. Because this is at least equivocal, if not causing harm. That's what they found in this study with 60,000 people. And, well, now we know that cholesterol wasn't the problem. So you're taking a drug that reduces something that's actually beneficial to you, and it's causing side effects. So no, this isn't going to be very helpful. And there are other studies, but tons of studies, hundreds of thousands of people, additively, showing that the cholesterol is actually beneficial. You have things, and so people started looking back at these studies. There was a 7-nation study that I believe Ansel Keys came out with, and he was a very influential scientist. He came up with the RDAs, recommended daily allowances. He's a nutritional scientist and so forth. Sure. Had a lot of clout, but he also was bought and paid for. There's documentation of this, that he was a paid stooge of the sugar companies, and he was putting out bullshit. And so one of his studies was the 7-nation studies, and all these studies actually showed only a correlation. Correlation is not causation. All these studies were correlative. They were very bad, and they were only correlative, but they just kept pumping these things out. People say, oh, well, it's just this preponderance of evidence. I remember reading a journal article in 1956 from Journal of American Medical Association talking about how basically people have accepted that cholesterol is causing heart disease, but he's like, but this is based on, as this argued, it's like this is based on very poor studies, very low quality evidence, and he just went through them and just tore these things apart. It's back in 1956.
Wow. Is that like a paper or something?
Yeah, in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association. This guy just excoriated these things for 12 pages, just ripping these things apart.
Way back when, and we're still having this debate now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's because of the USDA, because this was hotly debated, but the sugar companies just kept pumping in all this. Oh, well, look at this. Look at what we find and stuff. But they weren't actually saying that they were being funded by the sugar companies. That was the thing. That's illegal. You have to sort of say where the funding exactly. Yeah. And so they weren't doing that. And so you start looking at these. Look at the 7-nation study that showed 7 countries and on a graph on how much cholesterol they were eating and the rate of heart disease, right? And so it's this parabolic curve. The more saturated fat, the more heart disease. That's what they showed. They showed it for seven countries, right? But actually, they had complete information for I think 23 or 24 countries, right? They used the 7 that fit that curve.
Perfect.
And if you plot all the rest of them, yeah, exactly. It's just sort of just show what they wanted to show. And if they had more, and if you just plotted all of them, it's just scatters all around. There isn't even a correlation. Now again, correlation is not causation. So you have this correlation, this correlative graph, but that's not causation. You don't know why that is. But there isn't even a correlation, because when you plot the other nations in that they had available data for at that time, there isn't even a correlation. Okay, so that's out. And that was out then. They knew it was out. And there was a thing called the Framingham study. It's really the keystone study in cardiology. They followed these, I think, factory workers in New England for like 20 years.
Okay.
And they've looked at all these different markers and things like that, and what was sort of indicated in different sort of health outcomes. And they concluded and they reported that higher total cholesterol, before we distinguished any of the kinds of cholesterol, but total cholesterol, the higher total cholesterol, more at-risk cardiovascular risk you would. And there's, this is it. Done 70. It was like 76,000 people over 20 years. This is conclusive. First of all, correlation, not causation. Second of all, their own data showed the opposite of what they reported. So the actual outcome was that the higher total cholesterol you had, the more protected you were from this. You didn't have heart disease. No. And so it's completely fraudulent. And so that was completely misreported. That's now been reversed. Not everybody knows this yet. Even in the medical community, we had a debate with carnivores versus vegans on the ACNAM, and one of the people on the vegan side was a cardiologist, and he was not aware of these studies. And he's still talking about how cholesterol is the end all be all. We're having another debate in February just on cholesterol, and I've been asked to be a part of that as well. And we'll see what they respond to that. But we know that this was fraudulent. We know that there isn't even a correlation. We know all these things were made up. And now we have all these studies post-2015 showing the exact opposite of what we've been told. And we have the work from Dr. Robert Lustig from UCSF, in the biochemistry department, showing that fructose is, they have, is, I don't know if they've shown causation between fructose and heart disease, but they've shown causation between fructose and metabolic disease, metabolic syndrome. And so, they've showed biochemically that this is integral in that disease process, inflammatory disease process of heart disease. So, this is completely wrong. So people ask me what my cholesterol is, and I tell them I don't care.
Yeah.
I literally don't care. You get certain types of cholesterol from fructose and alcohol, like SD-LDL, VLDL. These are small particulate sizes of LDL. There's tons of different kinds of LDL cholesterol. We're talking about Dr. Mason in the low carb Australia, low carb down under talks. He does a lot of talks specifically on particulate sizes of cholesterol and what matters and which ones do what and why you have to care about this. So whatever your LDL cholesterol is, it matters what the particulates are. And some are good and some are bad.
Right.
Well, the ones that are bad come from alcohol and fructose, right? And then if you have high blood sugar is harmful because when you have it too high, it will actually physically fuse to other molecules called glycation. And so you can glycate these SD-LDL and VLDLs and make them act in a pathological fashion, and that is actually part of this process of atherosclerosis. So if you're not eating sugar or drinking sodas or drinking alcohol, you're not going to have the SD-LDL and the VLDL,
which are the real harmful
ones. Yeah. And if you're not eating a bunch of carbohydrates, so your blood sugar is at a standard level, it's not jumping up and down wildly, then you're not going to be glycating these things if you had them, which you don't, right? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your cholesterol is if you don't eat that crap. And so one way, we don't want to always check for the particulate sizes and things, but one way of looking at that is to look at your HDL and your triglycerides. If your HDL is high, as the standard test would consider high, and your triglycerides are low, then that means that you actually have whatever your LDL cholesterol is, high or low or whatever, they're the good kind of LDL.
Right, okay.
More.
That's the relationship you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you can look at the particulate size and so forth, but that as a general rule, if you have high LDL cholesterol and low triglycerides, your LDL is fine.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So in summary, there is no correlation or causation between cholesterol and heart disease.
No, absolutely not.
But there is with sugar. or with
Yeah.
carbohydrates.
Yeah, sugar and carbohydrates and that sort of whole thing. Yeah. There was a book written in the 1970s. I think it was called what was it? It was like Sweet White Deadly or something like that, and it was it's something like that anyway. But yeah, it was all the arguments on why sugar is causing these problems, and sugar heart disease is a very newly discovered disease, and as people were saying at the time, how can we've been eating fat forever.
Yeah.
How can
Yeah,
an
there was
ancient
some
diet cause a new disease?
Yeah.
That doesn't
Yeah.
hold water. And people say, well, maybe it was just happening all the time, we just didn't notice it because we're just so stupid. And I was like, yeah, Einstein was an idiot, that guy. And Da Vinci, what a moron he was, inventing a helicopter in the 1500s. I mean, what an idiot, And no, I mean these guys, they did more with less. We have iPhones, we can look up anything. They didn't have that. They had to figure it out themselves. And so, when they're doing it, you made your name as a doctor by discovering new diseases and new things that
so they would have been on the hunt.
Absolutely.
We're trying to find out.
You're doing dissections and dissections and dissections and autopsies and autopsies and autopsies and autopsies. And if you were the first one to discover, heart disease and atherosclerosis, you'd be all over that thing.
You'd name it after yourself.
You would, absolutely would. And so that's how you made a name for yourself as a doctor, And so, no, we wouldn't have. It has just been happening forever.
Yeah.
They look back to, like the ancient Egyptians and look at mummies, like, oh, they had atherosclerosis. It must have been because the kings were, eating a bunch of fat and all these sorts of things. Well, they actually mummified everybody, not just the pharaohs, And so they actually looked at that. They all had this stuff. They're all pretty fat. They had these statues. They had these guts, and the guys had gynecomastia and so forth. And
What was that?
Wheat.
Yeah.
They're eating a bunch of wheat.
Grain.
Yeah, a lot of grains. And so, they all have these sorts of problems. And so they said, well, it must have been the pharaohs eating all these sorts of things. But we actually have isotope studies. So stable isotope studies, you can see basically what animals have eaten. Is you take the mummy or the fossil, and you can actually test and see what they've been eating. If they've been eating plants, or if they've been eating animals that ate plants, or they've been eating animals that ate animals that ate plants, right? And then there's your carnivore rating, and this is how we know that humans are hyper carnivores last 2.5 million years, because we were eating animals that ate plants, but we were also eating other carnivores that ate animals that ate plants.
Right. Okay.
And so they did these stable isotope studies for these mummies, and they found that no, they were all eating the same thing. They were all basically eating a bunch of wheat.
The grain and the breads.
Yeah, and maybe the wealthier class was able to eat more of it because they could afford it and so forth. But they were all eating the same things. Yeah. So cholesterol is not what we've been led to believe.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.